can we draw a distinction between authoritarian regimes and communism? Is it possible to steelman the case that not all implementations of socialism and communism would lead to the atrocities we've seen in the Soviet Union and in China under Mao? Or like when you, in studying all of this, how much blame do you put on the ideologies, on Marxist ideologies versus the particular leaders and dictators?
Well, you have to blame the leaders a lot because they had different leaders in different countries were different from each other. Dubček, who took over Czechoslovakia and he tried to introduce socialism with a human face in the Prague Spring of 1968, he was like, all right, we got to do away with this authoritarianism. We got to have more free speech. He was thinking of introducing elements of democracy. Now, then the Russians sent in the tanks. But the point is, he certainly was someone who was like, all right, this has got to stop. This is just absolutely crazy. Khrushchev and Stalin were not the same animal at all. So I think the problem with communism in the Marxist sense is that you're going to have introduce an element of authoritarianism simply because you can't have economic planning. If I don't have a price mechanism, I don't know how price is what is me knowing as a consumer or a producer what should be produced or what there's a shortage of. As prices increase, that's a signal that we have a shortage here. As prices decrease, that means that there's a surplus here. But if I'm setting the price, I don't really know how much wheat I need to produce if I'm compared to corn, as compared to shoes, as compared to Santa costumes. So that is a big problem. The other issue is if you have one agency, the government, having a monopoly on, let's suppose, the news, like you were talking about earlier with Twitter, it's going to be really hard to have any kind of objective discourse because everyone is going to be working for the same organization. That is going to cause a problem in terms of having a feedback mechanism, even in the best scenario, in terms of this is a problem, this isn't a problem. And when you have a monopoly, which is what a government is, I think people are very familiar with what the problems happen with monopoly. There's lack of accountability. Bureaucracies are faceless, and then no one's to blame. But and yet everyone kind of suffers as a consequence. So it doesn't necessarily have to be as authoritarian as Stalinism, but you can't have a government which is authority by its nature be this pervasive without a strong amount of oppression. And same thing with, even if you just have, like, let's suppose socialized healthcare, you're going to have to make it illegal for doctors to practice privately. You're going to have rationing, so on and so forth. Now, that might be a price that people are willing to pay because you can't have infinite spending on healthcare, right? So something's going to have to give somewhere. So there is an element of authoritarianism there, and people are comfortable with that, and I can wrap my head around it. But if you're going to have one organization running literally everything in society, I don't see how you do that and have any measure of liberalism.